The palace shimmered with gold, music echoed through endless halls, and laughter floated beneath painted ceilings, even as a nation beyond its gates quietly starved. In the final decades of the 18th century, no figure embodied this contrast more completely than Marie Antoinette. She lived at the center of unimaginable luxury, moving through a world carefully designed to shield her from discomfort. Yet just beyond that world, something irreversible was beginning to take shape among the people. History would remember her not simply as a queen, but as a symbol of distance and excess. She represented a system that could no longer understand the people it ruled. She did not see the revolution coming, or perhaps more precisely, she could not comprehend it. By the time its reality reached her, the foundations of her world were already collapsing. Marie Antoinette was born into power in 1755 in Vienna, the daughter of Empress Maria Theresa of Austria. Her life was never meant to belong to her alone. From the beginning, she was part of a larger political design shaped by empire and strategy. Royal children were instruments of diplomacy, and marriages were tools used to secure alliances. She was raised with that understanding, trained to represent her family and empire with precision. But despite this preparation, she was still only a child, placed into a complex world. At 14, she left Austria behind and traveled to France to marry the future king, Louis XVI. The marriage was not about love, but about maintaining stability between two powerful nations. When she crossed into France, even her possessions were replaced to mark her transformation. She now belonged entirely to her new country, both symbolically and politically. Versailles was not just a palace, but a stage where power was constantly performed. Every movement was watched, and every gesture was interpreted by those around her. Life there followed strict rituals that controlled every part of daily existence. Even private moments were turned into public events observed by nobles. For Marie Antoinette, this environment was overwhelming and suffocating. She struggled to adapt to the constant scrutiny and rigid expectations placed upon her. Instead of embracing court discipline, she began to withdraw from it. She searched for comfort in areas she could control within her limited freedom. She turned to fashion, entertainment, and social gatherings as forms of escape. These choices gradually shaped how others perceived her. Her extravagant dresses and elaborate hairstyles became symbols of her identity. What began as personal coping slowly transformed into public image. She created a private world within Versailles where she could avoid court pressures. At the Petit Trianon, she surrounded herself with a more relaxed environment. There, she constructed an artificial version of simplicity that mimicked rural life. She dressed as a shepherdess and walked through carefully designed gardens. This imagined simplicity stood in stark contrast to the harsh realities outside the palace. While she acted out simplicity, real peasants struggled daily for survival. France itself was under growing pressure from years of war and economic strain. The state carried enormous debt that continued to expand. Financial instability deepened as attempts at reform repeatedly failed. The system favored the privileged and placed heavy burdens on the poor. Food shortages became more frequent, and harvest failures made conditions worse. Bread prices rose to levels that many families could not afford. For ordinary people, daily survival became uncertain and increasingly difficult. Each passing year intensified frustration and hardship across the country. Inside Versailles, however, life continued as though nothing had changed. The court maintained its rituals and preserved the illusion of stability. Marie Antoinette became the visible symbol of this disconnect between power and reality. She was labeled Madame Deficit and blamed for excessive spending. Whether accurate or not, this image shaped how the public viewed her. She came to represent everything wrong with the monarchy. Stories and rumors spread, reinforcing her reputation as detached and indifferent. The phrase, "let them eat cake," captured that perception perfectly. Even if she never said it, people believed she could have said it. That belief reflected how deeply she was misunderstood and resented. As the 1780s progressed, tensions continued to rise across France. The financial crisis worsened and became impossible to ignore. Political divisions deepened, preventing effective reform from taking place. The monarchy appeared weak and unable to resolve the crisis. Confidence in leadership declined as frustration grew among the population. Anger began to organize into a collective force. Pamphlets spread criticism of the monarchy and questioned its legitimacy. Enlightenment ideas challenged the concept of divine authority. People began to see themselves, not as subjects, but as citizens with rights. This shift in thinking changed how power was understood. In 1789, the Estates General was called to address the crisis. It revealed deep divisions within French society. The Third Estate demanded representation and refused to accept inequality. Their actions marked the beginning of a broader transformation. What followed was not reform, but revolution driven by public action. The storming of the Bastille symbolized the shift of power. Inside Versailles, the court struggled to understand what was happening. The response remained slow and uncertain. Marie Antoinette was increasingly viewed as an obstacle to change. Rumors about her influence further damaged her reputation. The gap between monarchy and people became impossible to bridge. Trust eroded beyond repair. In October 789, thousands marched from Paris to Versailles. Many were women driven by hunger and anger. They demanded bread, demanded action, and demanded accountability. The palace was no longer beyond reach. The royal family was forced to leave Versailles and relocate to Paris. They were placed under the watch of the people. This moment marked the loss of royal distance and authority. The monarchy was no longer untouchable. From then on, every decision was observed and judged. Control began to slip away rapidly. Marie Antoinette tried to protect her family and maintain stability. She turned to foreign powers for support. She hoped intervention would restore the monarchy's authority. Instead, these actions increased suspicion against her. To revolutionaries, she appeared to be working against France. Trust between the monarchy and the people collapsed completely. In 1791, the royal family attempted to escape. The plan failed, and they were captured. They were returned to Paris, confirming fears of betrayal. This moment sealed the monarchy's fate. In 1792, the monarchy was abolished and replaced by a republic. The political structure of France changed completely. Louis XVI was put on trial and found guilty. His execution marked the end of royal rule. Marie Antoinette was left alone and stripped of power. She became a prisoner rather than a queen. Her identity and authority were reduced to nothing. She awaited judgment from the revolution she could not understand. She was put on trial months later with charges of treason. The accusations were severe and politically motivated. The outcome was inevitable given the climate of the time. Public anger demanded a decisive conclusion. She was found guilty and sentenced to death. Her execution was set as a final act. On October 16, 1793, she was executed at the age of 37. The scene marked the end of her life. The woman who once lived in luxury died in a public square. The contrast defined her story completely. Her life symbolized the gap between power and reality. It reflected a system that failed to adapt. The revolution itself was built on years of inequality and frustration. It was not caused by one individual. Marie Antoinette became the face of that collective anger. She represented a world that people wanted to replace. Her image simplified complex problems into a single symbol that made her an easy target during crisis. She did not create the conditions of the revolution, but she came to embody them in public perception. Her story shows how symbols shape historical events. They give direction to widespread emotion. Marie Antoinette's life cannot be reduced to a single narrative. It exists between misunderstanding and reality. She was shaped by a system that limited her awareness. That system itself was fragile and dependent on distance. When that distance collapsed, the system could not survive. Its structure depended on separation from reality. Her fall marked the end of an era in France. It signaled the collapse of absolute monarchy. Her story remains relevant because similar patterns appear throughout history. Power often becomes isolated over time. Warnings are ignored until change becomes unavoidable. By then, the consequences arrive suddenly and forcefully. Marie Antoinette did not see the revolution because her world prevented it. When reality broke through, it ended everything she knew. Her life stands as a reminder of the dangers of disconnection. Power without awareness leads to instability. Luxury without responsibility creates resentment among those who suffer. And history moves forward regardless of who is prepared for it.